Once upon a time, in a quiet little village, there lived a wise and kind grandfather named Sam. Sam had a young and curious grandson named Ethan, who loved to listen to his grandfather's stories. Every evening, Ethan would sit by his grandfather's side, eagerly waiting for another enchanting tale. One warm summer evening, as the sun began to set, Ethan asked his grandfather, "Grandpa, can you please tell me a story about doing good to others and being honest?" Grandpa Sam smiled at Ethan and began his story. "Of course, my dear Ethan. Let me tell you the story of the honest baker. Once upon a time, in the same village where we live, there was a kind and hard-working baker named Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson was known throughout the village for his delicious pastries, bread, and cakes. People from far and wide would come to buy his scrumptious treats. Now one day, as Mr. Johnson was preparing a batch of his famous cinnamon buns, he realized that he had run out of sugar. He was faced with a dilemma. Should he go to the market and buy sugar or use salt instead, which he had in abundance? The market was quite far, and he was afraid he would lose customers if he closed his bakery for too long. Feeling tempted, Mr. Johnson decided to use salt instead of sugar, thinking that no one would notice the difference. But little did he know that young Emily, a regular customer, had a keen sense of taste and would be the first to taste the buns. The next morning, as Emily took a bite of the cinnamon bun, she immediately noticed the salty taste. She was surprised because Mr. Johnson's pastries had always been sweet and delightful. She decided to go to Mr. Johnson's bakery to ask him about it. When Emily arrived at the bakery, she found Mr. Johnson tending to his oven. She politely said, "Mr. Johnson, I believe there might be a mistake in the cinnamon buns I bought. They taste salty instead of sweet." Mr. Johnson felt ashamed, but decided to be honest. He admitted, "You're right, Emily. I ran out of sugar and used salt instead. I thought no one would notice. I am truly sorry." Emily appreciated Mr. Johnson's honesty. She replied, "Thank you for telling the truth. I know we all make mistakes, but it is important to be honest about them." Mr. Johnson realized that he had made a mistake by compromising his honesty. He decided to bake a fresh batch of cinnamon buns with the right ingredients and deliver them to all his customers, apologizing for the previous mistake. He also gave Emily a special treat as a token of his gratitude for her honesty. Word quickly spread about Mr. Johnson's honesty and his dedication to making things right. The villagers admired him even more, and his bakery flourished like never before. People respected him for his honesty, and he gained many loyal customers. Grandpa Sam concluded the story by saying, "Ethan, the moral of the story is that honesty is always the best policy. It may be tempting to take shortcuts or tell lies, but in the end, honesty brings respect and trust from others, just as it did for Mr. Johnson. Remember, my dear, being honest and doing good to others is a path that leads to a heart full of happiness and respect." Ethan nodded, understanding the valuable lesson his grandfather had taught him. He realized that honesty and kindness were qualities worth cherishing, just like the stories his grandfather shared with him.